The cruelest laughs aren't always loud. Sometimes they echo quietly behind your back until someone strong enough stands up for you. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. It was early when Howard pulled into the lot that morning. The sky still held the softness of dawn, and the dealership hadn't opened yet. But the lights inside were already on, casting a warm glow against the cool glass. The new flag out front stirred gently in the breeze. Howard parked his truck in the usual spot, took a deep breath, and stepped out. There was no ceremony, no audience, just footsteps on pavement and the quiet hum of a place that had learned to listen. Inside, Greg was already at the counter, sorting keys and service tags. He looked up and nodded. "You're early," he said. Howard gave a half-smile. "Old habits." Greg walked over, holding 2 coffees. "I figured." They sat in silence for a while at the table near the front, just beyond the reach of the morning sun. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. The kind that said more than conversation ever could. A few minutes later, Arnold walked in, not in a suit today. Jeans, boots, a simple jacket. He didn't say anything at first, just placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. Howard glanced at it. A list of names. Dates beside each one. Upcoming deliveries. Veterans who had reached out asking for vehicles. Ramps, help, anything. "You built a ripple, Howard," Arnold said. "Now it's moving." Howard scanned the list, his finger pausing over one name. "This one," he said. "He was in my unit. Thought he'd vanished." Arnold nodded. "He reached out last night. Saw your photo on the wall." Howard sat back in his chair. Didn't think any of this would matter. Not in the long run. "It always matters," Arnold said. "People just need to be reminded." Later that day, a local news crew stopped by. They weren't flashy, just a young reporter and a quiet cameraman. They asked if they could interview Howard, get his side of the story. Howard declined politely, but recommended they speak to Greg instead. "He saw it happen," he said. "He'll tell it right." Greg stood nervously in front of the camera. He didn't rehearse, didn't try to sound important. He just spoke. "There was a moment," he said, "when I looked over and saw Howard just sitting there, and I knew something was wrong. Not because he looked lost, but because no one else even noticed him. That silence, that ignorance, it felt heavy. It didn't feel right." The footage aired that evening, but by then, the story had already outgrown the news cycle. Veterans from across the country sent messages. Some came in person. A retired Air Force mechanic drove 7 hours just to shake Howard's hand. Another man, missing both legs, wheeled into the dealership and said, "I don't need a car. I just needed to see if this place was real." It was. One Friday, a boy came in with his grandfather. The boy clutched a notepad, pages filled with scribbled questions. He approached Howard carefully. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Howard smiled gently. "Go ahead." "Is it true you used to fix radios under fire?" Howard paused, then nodded. "Sometimes, when it mattered." The boy sat across from him. "Why'd you do it? Weren't you scared?" Howard thought for a moment. "Of course I was. But fear doesn't stop the signal. And if someone's counting on your voice to break through, you don't go quiet." The boy wrote that down like it was scripture. One afternoon, Arnold and Howard stood outside as a flatbed truck delivered another batch of wheelchairs and supplies for the nonprofit they'd quietly launched. No big branding, no fanfare. Just a line on the side of the trailer that read, "No voice unheard." Arnold looked over at Howard. "Do you remember when I used to run laps around the base? Try to outpace everyone?" Howard chuckled. "I remember you running straight into a wall because you refused to wear glasses." Arnold grinned. "And you said, 'No one outruns a mission. You learn to navigate it.' I never forgot that." Howard's face softened. "I didn't think you heard me that day." "I heard every word," Arnold said. "I just wasn't ready to understand them yet." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lot, Howard sat on the bench near the entrance. A woman passed by and slowed. She wore a faded navy jacket. She looked at the plaque, then at Howard. "Do you mind if I sit?" He shifted slightly to to give her space. It's why it's here. They didn't speak much. Just watched the sky change colors and let the quiet fill the space between them. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the last cars were parked, Greg walked past a wall of portraits and paused. He reached up and straightened one photo that had tilted slightly. Howard's photo. Then he turned to the new plaque just beneath it. The letters gleamed under the soft overhead light. Built on brotherhood. No voice unheard. Outside, Howard's truck pulled away, taillights disappearing into the stillness of the road ahead. There was no music, no applause, just a story that had finally been heard, and the quiet certainty that it would never be forgotten. Noah didn't cry at school. He didn't need to. The others were already loud enough. By second period, the nickname had taken root. Mr. Muscles Jr., a sarcastic crown meant to humiliate, not honor. They printed it on sticky notes, drew flexing stick figures with massive arms and toothpick legs. One had Arnold's name crossed out and replaced with imaginary friend. They taped them to lockers and chairs, lunchboxes and water bottles. Every surface became a billboard for mockery. In the hallway, kids started greeting him with fake accents, over-the-top bodybuilder voices, and cartoon poses. "I'll be back for more lies," someone muttered as he passed. The jokes hit harder than fists because they were dressed in laughter. Everyone joined in. Even the quiet ones didn't look away. They just looked down and kept walking. In the cafeteria, a carton of milk slid across the table toward Noah's tray. "Protein," someone snickered, "for your championship legacy." It tipped over. No one cleaned it. Noah didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He just grabbed a napkin, dabbed at the spill, and kept eating, chewing slow, swallowing slower. His stomach twisted, but he kept going. The moment you stop, they win. That's what his grandfather used to say. You can't lift your name unless you stay on your feet. But staying on your feet got harder every hour. That afternoon, in the gym hallway, someone had taped a poster of a bodybuilding trophy with the words, "Fake it till you bench it," in bold black marker. The silhouette in the drawing had Noah's hair and Arnold's frame. It was crude but effective. When he saw it, he didn't tear it down. He didn't even blink. He just walked past it, eyes forward, lips tight. Coach Zimmer laughed the hardest. He wasn't loud about it. He was worse, quiet and amused. In the teacher's lounge, between bites of a protein bar, he leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "That kid's probably confusing Arnold with one of those action figures. You know how imaginations run wild in lonely homes." His friend laughed. At least he didn't say Superman. Small mercy. The janitor didn't laugh. He kept wiping the counters, silent, his hands moving in small circles. Later, when the room emptied, he walked to the lounge window and stared out at the field. Noah was out there alone, tracing the same circle in the grass with his sneaker. Again, like he was trying to carve a hole to disappear into. That night, Noah didn't say much at dinner. The meatloaf cooled on his plate. The green beans wilted. His fork moved them into piles, then back again. Across the table, Arnold watched. He didn't ask. He didn't press. He had learned the silence that followed shame wasn't something you talked through. It was something you waded through. Eventually, Noah whispered, "They don't believe me." Arnold nodded once. "That's their choice." Noah looked up, eyes rimmed with red. "Maybe they're right." Arnold didn't flinch. "Do you believe me?" the boy asked. Arnold leaned forward. "I don't need you to believe in stories. I need you to believe in yourself." "But you were a champion, yes," Arnold interrupted gently. "But even champions lose the room sometimes." He tapped the table once with his callous finger. "You only lose when you stop standing." The next morning, the whispering began before Noah even opened his locker. Someone had drawn a caricature. Him, next to Arnold, both flexing with speech bubbles that read, "Totally true story, bro." The artwork was taped to his locker door, laminated even. Effort had gone into it. That made it worse. Across the hallway, Coach Zimmer laughed into his coffee. "That kid might actually believe he's got Mr. Olympia in his family tree. Cute." During free period, Someone snuck into the weight room and placed a paper cutout of Noah's face on a foam dumbbell. It read, "Lift with your lies." It sat there on the bench press, mocking silently. When Noah saw it, he walked over, picked it up, folded it slowly, and threw it in the trash. He didn't slam the lid. He didn't shout. He just walked away. But the worst part wasn't the noise. It was the quiet between jokes, the quiet in the bathroom stall where someone had scratched "Liar Lifter" into the metal door, the quiet in class when kids glanced at him and then at each other and smirked, the quiet of Mia sitting 2 rows away and never once turning around. She hadn't said a word since the gym, not even a nod, not even a sorry. And maybe she didn't mean harm. Maybe she just didn't want to be the next joke. Either way, she didn't stand up, and that silence was louder than any laugh. That evening, Arnold was in the garage. The air smelled of steel and sawdust. He stood beside a workbench, an old weight belt coiled beside him. The leather was cracked, the stitching worn. He didn't say anything when Noah entered, just nodded toward the stool. Noah sat. Arnold unwrapped a cloth from beneath the bench. Inside was a black and white photo. Arnold shirtless, flexing in the Vienna sunlight, a gold trophy by his feet. "They think stories are made up," Arnold said, voice low, "because they forget real strength is quiet." Noah didn't speak. He didn't need to. His hands rested on the table, his eyes fixed on the photograph. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they didn't need to explain anymore. By the time Noah went to bed, the jokes still hurt, the drawing still stung, but something had shifted, not outside, but inside. He stood a little straighter brushing his teeth, held eye contact in the mirror just a little longer. There was no dramatic music, no applause, just a boy, a reflection, and the beginning of something heavier than muscle, conviction. Because you don't have to win a crowd to prove your truth. Sometimes, all it takes is to stop walking with your head down and wait. Under the cafeteria's dull fluorescent lights, Ethan sat alone, his lunch untouched. A peanut butter sandwich with the edges trimmed. His mom still made it the way he liked, even if he didn't say much anymore. Around him, the noise swirled, students bouncing between conversations, laughter, the clatter of trays, and chairs scraping linoleum. But none of it touched him. He was in a different kind of quiet, the kind you carry inside when you stop expecting to be heard. Across the room, a boy called Cody flipped his water bottle onto the table with a loud thud. The cap hit and bounced off toward Ethan's tray. "Oops," Cody said without moving to retrieve it. Ethan didn't flinch. He picked up the cap slowly and slid it across the table without looking up. Another kid, Julian, leaned back in his seat and smirked. "So, Ethan," he said, loud enough to catch a few heads nearby, "your grandpa's still pumping iron with the Avengers?" Laughter trickled in from the sides like a faucet that couldn't be turned off. Ethan said nothing. His fingers brushed over the crust of his sandwich, then pulled away. "Come on, man," Julian continued, pressing now. "You said he was a champion, right? Mr. Olympia or something." The way he said it made it sound like a cartoon, like saying he'd once flown to school on a dragon. One of the girls nearby joined in, pretending to lift an invisible barbell. "Guess muscles skip a generation," she said, looking Ethan up and down. "Because I don't see any of that Schwarzenegger blood." The laughter this time was bigger, bolder. People were watching now. Not everyone laughed, but no one interrupted. Ethan's jaw tensed. He didn't defend himself. Didn't bring up the framed photo that still sat in his room, or the medals tucked in a box under his bed. He just sat there, like stillness might somehow make the moment pass quicker. At the teacher's table, Coach Haver glanced up, chewing slowly, then looked back down at his phone. He didn't intervene. Maybe he didn't hear. Maybe he did and didn't think it mattered. Just kids being kids. Just noise. Julian leaned forward, propping his elbows on the table. Noah's grandpa fought in the army. Grace's aunt ran the Boston Marathon. And your grandpa lifted weights. He laughed. "Cool legacy, man." The sarcasm cut sharper than shouting. Someone started humming the Terminator theme, slow and mechanical. Others picked it up like a game. a slow beat of mockery that wrapped around the table and squeezed the silence tighter. Ethan stood up. Not fast, not loud, just deliberate. He picked up his tray and turned to walk away. As he passed Julian's table, a small carton of chocolate milk skidded toward his shoes. It didn't burst. It just sat there, tilted slightly, like the moment had been caught off balance but hadn't fallen. Yet, Ethan didn't kick it. He didn't say anything. He just stepped around it and kept walking. In the hallway, the sound softened behind him, a buzzing that belonged to a world he wasn't trying to win over anymore. By the lockers, he paused. Not to cry, not to breathe, just to stand. He touched the edge of the locker door with one finger, then leaned his head against the cool metal. Behind him, the janitor passed slowly with a mop cart. He didn't say anything, but his eyes met Ethan for a second. A nod, barely there, like two people recognizing something unspoken. Then he moved on, back in the cafeteria. Coach Haver finally looked up again. The table was laughing. Ethan's seat was empty. He didn't ask why. In the art room, Ethan found a quiet corner. He opened his sketchbook. Pages filled with training poses, strong silhouettes, bold ink lines of muscles mid-motion. The kind of bodies that carried discipline, not just bulk. The kind his grandfather had once carved out of nothing but hunger and grit. At the bottom of one drawing, he'd written a note in his own blocky handwriting. What you build stays with you, even when nobody looks. He stared at the page for a long time. Then he turned it. Clean sheet. New page. The rest of the day moved like slow water. Teachers spoke, but their words floated. Students whispered, but Ethan didn't hear. In history, someone passed him a paper with a sketch of a stick figure lifting a dumbbell the size of a house, and underneath, in jagged letters, Mr. Delusion. He crumpled it without reacting. At dismissal, the wind had picked up. The flag outside the school flapped loudly in the late afternoon light. Ethan waited by the bike rack. His jacket zipped high. His ride was late. He didn't mind. He didn't check his phone. He just stood. That night at dinner, his mom asked how school was. He said it was fine. His fork pushed peas around the plate like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit. She didn't press. Later, in his room, he pulled down the old shoebox from the closet. Inside were photos, clippings, an old gym membership card laminated and faded, and a postcard from Vienna. On the back, a signature. Just a first name. Arnold. He held the card between both hands like it was made of something heavier than paper. He didn't read it. He didn't need to. He just held it until the silence around him felt like something solid again. Outside, the porch light buzzed faintly. And upstairs, a boy sat quietly with his history in his hands, not broken, just waiting. The next morning arrived like any other, except the air felt different, thicker somehow, like something was about to shift. The gym lights flickered to life one by one, buzzing faintly overhead as students poured into the bleachers, half awake, dragging backpacks and voices with them. It was the final day of athletic week, and Coach Haver stood at center court like a man preparing for a stage, clipboard tucked under one arm, whistle already between his teeth. Ethan entered through the side doors, shoulders squared but eyes low. He took his seat near the edge of the bleachers, far from the clusters of noise and side glances. A few kids nudged each other. The joke hadn't faded. It had just gone quiet, like a spark buried under ash, waiting. Coach Haver's voice boomed into the mic. All right, folks, big finale today. We got obstacle courses, demonstrations, and maybe, his eyes flicked toward Ethan, a little entertainment. The mic caught some laughter from the front row. Ethan didn't react. His hand stayed in his lap. Fingers curled inward like holding something invisible. Haver grinned. But first, he said, scanning his clipboard dramatically, we've got a guest. Someone special. Someone with, shall we say, a very physical legacy. He chuckled. Seems we've got a relative of a world champion among us. There were murmurs now, heads turning, a few mock whispers. Guess who? And Mr. Olympia's grandson reporting for duty. Then, from behind the bleachers, the gym doors creaked open, not in a rush, not in performance, just a steady push and a hush that followed like a ripple on still water. A black SUV had parked out front moments earlier, but no one had paid attention. Now, every eye shifted toward the light spilling in from a hallway. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped into the gym. No music, no fanfare, just boots on polished floor, each step echoing louder than any microphone. His suit was dark, tailored but simple, his presence upright and still as if he'd never left the discipline of the stage or the ring. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The gym fell completely silent. Even Coach Haver's smirk wilted a little as Arnold crossed the floor. He didn't stop until he stood at center court, directly across from Ethan's row. And then his eyes moved, just once, locking with Ethan's. No nod, no wave, just recognition. Like two people had shared something no one else could name. Arnold turned slowly, surveying the gym. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. Someone told me there's a boy here being laughed at for telling the truth. The students shifted uncomfortably. A few stared at their shoes. Others looked to Coach Haver for cues. He stayed frozen, lips parting slightly, but no words followed. Arnold didn't raise his voice. They say he lied about his family, that he made up a legacy. A long pause. Well, Arnold said, reaching into his coat, I came to clear that up. He pulled out a folded certificate, old but preserved, and handed it to the nearest staff member. National Bodybuilding Federation. 7-time champion. That's my name. And that boy, he pointed directly at Ethan, is my grandson. A murmur swept through the bleachers like wind changing direction. Some gasped, some just stared. Arnold stepped forward again, eyes never leaving Ethan. You don't need to prove who you are to people who are too afraid to believe you. He turned toward the room. But sometimes showing up helps. Then he looked at Haver, not unkindly, but directly. When children laugh, it's because they haven't learned. But when adults laugh with them, that's when they forget how to teach. Coach Haver swallowed, hard. Arnold nodded once toward Ethan. Courage, he said quietly, isn't winning trophies. It's standing still while everyone else waits for you to fall. He turned to leave. No music, no applause, just the sound of his footsteps heading back toward the doors. Ethan sat there, hands still in his lap. But this time, his chin lifted slightly. Just a fraction. Enough. The gym didn't erupt. No one stood. But no one laughed either. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was something else. Respect, maybe, or just realization. And on his way out, Arnold paused one last time near the doors. He didn't look back when he spoke. Next time a child tells the truth, listen, even if it doesn't fit your version of the world. Then he was gone, and the gym exhaled, like it had forgotten it was holding its breath. Ethan didn't speak much the rest of the day. Not because he was embarrassed or unsure. Just quiet, like the room inside him had finally settled after days of shifting floors. Whispers still passed in the halls, but they were different now. Not cruel, not mocking, just quieter, as if everyone was still processing the weight of what they saw. Some kids looked at him longer than they used to. Some avoided his gaze altogether. Others offered a quick glance, like they were testing a new kind of respect, but didn't know how to hand it over yet. After sixth period, he lingered in the gym alone. The lights had dimmed to their default hum, casting long rectangles across the polished floor. His backpack sat beside him on the bleachers. He didn't reach for it. He just stared down at the center court, where Arnold had stood, where the truth had landed without needing a microphone. The same court where Ethan had once imagined himself invisible. From the office above, Coach Haver watched through the glass, arms crossed, lips pressed in. The clipboard sat untouched on his desk. He didn't write anything, just looked. Downstairs, Ethan stood up, slung his backpack over one shoulder, and headed for the door. As he passed a whiteboard near the lockers, he noticed the drawing had been wiped clean. No new joke had replaced it. The space was just blank. And somehow, that said more than any words could. At home that evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to sketch drawings of Arnold's trophies from old photos. Now, one of those photos sat in front of him, unfolded from a drawer and laid carefully beneath a small desk lamp. Arnold in his prime, shirtless, muscles carved like stone, holding a medal with a grin, so wide it looked like the world had already congratulated him before he even stepped off stage. Ethan stared at it, not smiling, not proud, just grounded. Arnold walked in quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. No protein shakes. No performance. Just warmth. He set one mug in front of Ethan and took the seat across from him. For a while, they sat in silence. Finally, Arnold asked, "Did you feel different?" Ethan shook his head. "Not really." Arnold smiled faintly. "That's good. Means the world didn't change you. Just caught up a little." Ethan looked down at the photo. They stopped laughing. Arnold nodded. "For now, they'll find something else soon. People always do. Why didn't you tell anyone before?" Ethan asked. Arnold ran a hand along the side of his mug. "Because trophies don't stop kids from being cruel. And walking into a room just to silence it? That's not power. That's theater." Ethan blinked. "So why now?" Arnold looked him in the eye. "Because you stood up before I did." Outside, the sky had gone from orange to purple. The porch light flickered on, casting their shadows across the window. Ethan didn't say anything, but the weight on his shoulders seemed lighter, like he wasn't carrying the legacy anymore, just sharing it. In his room later, he opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was the belt Arnold had once refused to put on display. The leather was still worn, the metal dull, but it was real. Ethan didn't lift it. He just ran a finger along the edge and let it be. The next morning at school, no one asked him for proof. No one teased. No one cheered either. It was something quieter. Kids nodded when he passed. Some didn't speak at all, but made room when he sat near them, like something invisible had changed and everyone felt it, even if no one knew what to call it. At lunch, Mia sat beside him again. No apology, no explanations, just presence. She opened her sketchbook and pushed it across the table. Inside was a drawing. Ethan standing on court, small, still, and beside him, a giant shadow cast on the wall behind him. Not a monster, not a ghost, just a shape with a posture like Arnold's, arms crossed, standing steady. He looked at it for a long moment. "You didn't draw his face," Ethan said softly. "I didn't need to," Mia replied. And she was right. He closed the book and pushed it back. After lunch, the principal made an announcement about the conclusion of athletic week. There was a short round of applause over the intercom. No mention of guests. No mention of names. But when the speaker clicked off, Coach Haver stepped into the gym with a box under one arm. He called for a student volunteer to help hang something. Most kids looked confused. Then he nodded at Ethan. No theatrics. No forced apology. Just a quiet gesture of acknowledgement. Ethan walked over and helped him mount the frame on the wall between the trophy case and the back entrance. Inside was a photo of Arnold in his championship pose, beneath a small plaque that read, "Legacy isn't told. It's lived." No one clapped, but no one laughed either. And for Ethan, that was more than enough. Ethan didn't bring it up again, not at dinner, not on the walk home, not even when Arnold casually mentioned that the gym looked cleaner than usual. He just nodded, like the words were too heavy to lift that day. And Arnold didn't push. He never did. Some lessons didn't come from questions or speeches. Some came from knowing exactly when to sit in the silence and let it teach what it needed to. But the next day, something small had changed. Not loud, not flashy, just present. Ethan stood a little straighter when he walked down the hallway. His steps didn't quicken when he passed a group of kids whispering near their lockers. He didn't look down anymore. He looked through. No one talked about the plaque on the wall. They didn't need to. It was there, framed, clean, quiet. It didn't shout, but somehow it said more than any announcement ever could. Some students slowed when they walked by it. Some sped up. A few even looked over their shoulders, like they were checking to see if anyone else saw it too. That was the thing about truth. It didn't need permission to take up space. It just had to be placed where people couldn't ignore it. Coach Haver didn't mention Ethan in class that day, but he didn't ignore him either. He asked him to demonstrate a stretch during warm-ups. He nodded when Ethan did it right. And when someone in the back muttered something under their breath, he looked up fast and sharp, and for once, the comment died before it ever reached air. At recess, Mia found Ethan sitting under the tree again. Not hiding, just resting. She didn't sit right away. She just stood in front of him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You know, she said after a long pause, I think your grandpa's cooler than mine. Ethan looked up. Does your grandpa lift bulldozers? No, she replied, but he did fall off the roof trying to fix a bird feeder. They both laughed, not loud, but real, and when she finally sat beside him, there was nothing awkward in the silence between them. It just fit. That afternoon, the sky turned gray and the first drops of spring rain began to patter against the classroom windows. Kids groaned. Plans were ruined. Games canceled. But Ethan didn't mind. Rain always made everything quieter, softer, the kind of weather that didn't rush you. When he got home, Arnold was already in the garage. The sound of weights clinking against iron echoed faintly from the open side door. Ethan didn't call out. He just walked in, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the old posters on the wall. Pictures of men with impossible muscles, sweat like oil, faces carved from focus and grit. And in the center of them all, one photo of Arnold, not acting, not smiling, just standing on stage, holding the last trophy of his competitive life. Ethan watched him finish a slow curl. Arnold's arms trembled slightly with the final rep, veins raised, face calm. He set the dumbbell down with a soft grunt and grabbed a towel. You're early, he said. Rain, Ethan replied. Arnold nodded, wiped his forehead, and motioned toward the bench. Ethan, Saturday, they still talk? Arnold asked. Not really, Ethan said. They just look different now, like they're trying to figure something out. They will for a while, Arnold said. Some people need time to unlearn who they thought you were. Ethan looked at the floor. I didn't expect him to believe it. Arnold smiled faintly. I didn't expect to walk back into a gym either. They sat for a moment in that half-lit space. Then Ethan reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded paper. Carefully, without speaking, he handed it over. Arnold took it, unfolded it slowly. Inside was a sketch, crude but thoughtful, of the gym wall. The plaque, and beneath it, someone standing, shoulders squared, not flexing, not grand, just present. I wanted to remember, Ethan said quietly. You will, Arnold replied. The rain picked up, drumming softly against the roof. In the corner, a dumbbell rolled slightly on the concrete floor and came to rest against a scuffed boot. Neither of them moved. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. After a while, Arnold stood, clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Come on, he said. Let's get something to eat. Real champions know when to refuel. Ethan followed. No resistance, just trust. And behind them, in the garage filled with echoes of sweat and stillness, the sketch sat folded on the bench, a quiet reminder that some legacies are passed without words, just the weight of being seen. The next Monday, the gym didn't feel the same. Not louder, not quieter, just different. The kind of different that settles into walls without anyone saying a word. Ethan walked in with his backpack slung low and his head upright. No one called his name. No one made a sound. But every eye that followed him carried something else now. Not challenge, not mockery, just awareness. The gloves were still in the case. They hadn't moved, but somehow they spoke louder than ever. A few students had started to pause when they passed. Not to joke, not to whisper, just to notice, to read, to let the silence around that glass box say what needed to be said. Coach Havard didn't call for Ethan during warm-ups. He didn't need to. Ethan took his spot without being told. He moved like someone who knew his place not because it was given, but because it had been earned. When they broke into drills, Mia stepped into the line next to him without hesitation. She didn't ask. He didn't comment. It just felt right. The only moment that stuttered was when a new student, one who hadn't been there the week before, pointed toward the gloves and asked, "Hey, what's that?" Someone nearby answered, "It's his grandfather's." Just that. No jokes. No punchlines. Just truth, delivered as gently as someone handing over a fragile photo. At lunch, Ethan ate outside, even though the sky was still heavy with leftover rain. The picnic benches were damp, but he didn't mind. The quiet was better out there. He drew again, not people this time, just motion, muscles, and movement. He sketched the way feet shifted during balance drills, the arch of a back in mid-jump, the clenched line of a wrist mid-punch. And at the edge of the page, a small signature. Yes. Back home, the porch creaked as Arnold leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed against the afternoon wind. He didn't turn when Ethan stepped outside, just patted the empty chair beside him. Ethan dropped his backpack, took the seat, and for a few minutes neither of them said anything. Then Arnold asked, "Still want to show them the belt?" Ethan shook his head. "They don't need to see it." Arnold nodded once. Slow. "Good. You were never supposed to need it either." Ethan took a breath, looked out across the street where a young boy was learning to ride a bike. His father jogged beside him, one hand barely resting on the seat, more encouragement than guidance. The boy didn't know how steady he was until the hand let go. "I was thinking," Ethan said after a long pause, "about what you said, about strength being quiet." Arnold waited. I think it's true, but only if someone's listening." Arnold cracked a smile. "And now they are?" "Some of them." "That's enough," Arnold said. "You don't need the whole world. You just need to hold your place long enough for it to shift." They watched the bike tip and recover. The boy caught himself, and the father didn't rush. He just walked behind him, hands in his pockets. Later that evening, Ethan opened the old sketchbook again. This time he drew the hallway. Just a wall and a case, and a boy walking past with another at his side. No faces, no trophies, just presence. At the bottom corner of the page, he wrote something for himself. "I don't need to fight to be heard." The next morning, something small waited for him in the locker. A folded note. No name, just 3 words on lined paper, written in shaky pencil. "You were right." He didn't show it to anyone. He didn't mention it. But he folded it 3 times and slipped it behind the plaque in his notebook. A quiet truth, just for him. When the gym bell rang, he walked slower than usual. Not from fear, not from hesitation, just reflection. Every step sounded clearer somehow, like the ground itself had stopped arguing with him. At the wall, he paused. One hand touched the glass. Not to wipe it, not to draw attention, just acknowledgement. Then he turned, walked into the room, took his place. Behind him, the gloves remained. Still, silent, steady, and that was enough.